Good day or good evening to one and all. Welcome to another fascinating episode of The Partial Historians. I am the Radness.
I am your other fascinating host, Dr. Greenfield.
Why, hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I am good.
Excellent.
Last time I think we talked,
We did talk.
It was Numa.
Indeed.
The king Numa.
The second king of Rome.
Yes. He's dead now.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Don't really know much about how that happened, but it did, nonetheless.
Sources aren't very clear.
No. So we're going to keep going down our list of kings for Rome. And I suppose one thing we might talk about before we delve any deeper, Dr. G, is that it is quite an odd period of time. And we've mentioned before that it's sort of, this semi-mythological, if not entirely mythological point of time.
Yeah, this is what makes it one of my favourite periods of time. We actually really know next to nothing.
Yeah. It's the fact that the kings that we're talking about, they rule for a super long time, really, when you think about it.
Very stable.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Like, they all rule for 25, 30, maybe even 45 years. And when you add it all up, it's like 7 guys over 250 years. It's pretty...
You think to yourself, why would you get rid of a system like that? Yeah. We'll get to that later.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I'm just pointing out to people that these are the names that have come down to us. But perhaps the things that we're talking about in relation to what they achieved and whatnot might have been more than one person.
Yeah, look, it's highly speculative.
Yeah.
And when you start to read around the evidence, the historians mostly concur that even though these events are credited to certain people, this is not enough evidence to suggest that this person was actually alive.
Yeah, exactly.
As much as we'd like to believe it, still and not sure about this guy.
Even if there was once a person with this name who was perhaps in a position of power, it's probably kind of a matter of convenience as well as just, historical accretion, I'm going to call it.
Ooh.
Yeah, nice, yeah.
It's a stain upon history.
That it just sort of adds up and rolls into this one.
Yeah. Well, part of the trouble is that by the time we get into the period where Romans are engaging in historiography, the writing down of their own history, they've decided when the founding date of the city is.
Yes.
And they have to numerically make everything else fit.
Exactly, yeah. It's kind of like what we talked about when we looked at Romulus and Remus, about the fact that they wanted Aeneas to be their founder, but then they were like, well, the timing's a little off because the Trojan War was a long time ago. We better fill it in with these Alban kings before we get to Romulus and Remus.
And Alban now actually will come to feature back into the narrative again.
It shall,
so Alban's not irrelevant.
No. I guess that's a good starting point as any for our next king, the third king of Rome, Tullus Hostilius.
Never heard of him? Not as famous as the first two.
No, you probably won't have heard of many of the other people, to be honest.
He's important, though.
He is, yes. And I think his name really gives it all away. Because Numa we had as, uber peaceful, hippie zen-like kind of guy. Tullus Hostilius, as his name implies, kind of more like Romulus. Bit hostile, bit warlike.
Yeah. Livy actually describes him as more warlike than Romulus.
Yeah,
and you're like,
and that's
good
something.
God.
Yeah.
And that was a violent, debauched episode in history.
Is such a thing possible?
Tell me, how does he do it?
Exactly, yes. So basically, when Numa dies, we go back to the interregnum, basically, which seems to be this kind of like an established thing now.
This is fascinating and seems to be highly stable for this period of history. Yeah. Be suspicious, listeners.
Yeah.
The king dies. They set up an official to be the interrex.
Yep.
Their job is to organise the people and the voting of the comitia.
Keep the system happening.
Everybody gets together, get the people to vote, get the Senate approval, and usher in the new king.
Yeah.
And this goes off by and large, in this instance,
without a hitch.
Yeah, no probs whatsoever.
Nobody's fighting for power like crazy.
No.
That would be crazy.
Tullus Hostilius comes with some reputation.
Yes.
He is a man of Sabine origin.
Yeah, once again. Actually, I'm just going to point out here, sorry, tangent again.
No, go for it.
But I think the interesting thing about this whole period with the kings of Rome, it's not really hereditary.
Yeah.
That's a weird thing about it, isn't it? You think monarchy, well, for me anyway, you think hereditary.
Well, maybe this is why it's going so well.
Yeah, maybe. It's all well explained.
Let's choose somebody who seems like they've got the appropriate qualifications for the role.
Yeah. Yeah, so they go for someone, as you might expect, who's young and virile.
And perhaps, the Romans are looking for a bit of a change-up. Numa is very sort of peaceful. He's all about the religious things, and everyone's like, look, we're putting ourselves in danger now.
Yeah.
Actually, we're not coming across as very dangerous in the region.
Exactly. We need to be a bit scarier. We need to add up the scary factor.
We might need a guy with a little bit more belligerence.
Yeah. I like to think of this as being like the Romans have been in a long-term relationship for a while, and now they want to go a bit crazy.
So they choose Tullus Hostilius, a bad boy.
Yeah, yeah, he is quite wild. Exactly. And he basically comes into the role kind of acting like they want him to, in that he's kind of looking for a reason to start a war.
He pretty much goes about stirring up everybody around him in anticipation of creating war.
Yeah, again, this is my picture of him. Sitting in Rome with a really long stick, like poking people around him.
Yeah, he seems to derive great pleasure. He sets up things quite nicely, I suppose, from his perspective, with the Albans.
Yes.
Early on.
Hence our reference to the Albans.
Yeah. There seems to be a bit of tension between Alban shepherds and Roman shepherds and people pushing cattle over other frontiers.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of land squabble going on, but you really wouldn't think that would escalate into a war.
No. A diplomatic person like Numa probably would have talked it through. And
yes. Brought everybody together. Yeah. Let's figure out where the line is and stay on one side.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
But Tullus is like, let's kick some ass.
What I'm really interested in doing is bringing some Alban guys into Rome and hosting them for a dinner.
Yeah, and keeping them busy while actually causing a war.
I'll go and, while they're there and distracted, I'll go and send some forces and get into some skirmishes with some Albans and then be like, dudes, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And they'll be like,
get the hell out of my palace.
But you invited me to a dinner.
And we were having such a good... What? I thought we were getting... What?
I thought you invited us because you wanted to be friends. Yeah. And he's like, as it turns out, that's a no on the friendship thing.
Yeah, just get out. Get out. I don't want to see you anymore. So as you can imagine, Albans and Romans are preparing for a war now.
The Albans are pretty upset. They've basically been done over. Yeah. And they're like, okay, well, if this is what you want, this is what you're going to have.
Exactly. And Livy calls it almost a civil war because, of course, the Albans and the Romans apparently... Well, they share this Trojan ancestry. Yeah,
they do, and obviously Romulus and Remus come out of the Alban line,
presumably.
Yeah, in some way.
Yeah, exactly.
So this idea that they've got hostilities are breaking out. Yep. The Albans are really they're quick to act. They get themselves together. They camp outside the city, really close.
Yeah,
and then they circle the whole city with a trench.
Ooh. That's not good.
Yeah. Goodness me, they must have had a lot of people. Or the city of Rome is really quite small at this point in time.
That's clearly true. Very likely.
You know what's going to be a strategic moment? Digging a trench around your entire city.
Yeah, exactly.
Come at us, bitches.
But things don't exactly progress the way you might think into an all-out... We're preparing you for this grand, large-scale battle. But no.
No. Part of the problem is that the king of the Albans, a guy called Clulius.
I'm glad you attempted that because I wasn't.
There are a lot of vowel sounds in that. The Alban king.
Cornelius.
Yeah, he's overseeing the construction of the trench. So the trench is named after him. So it's got a bit of a reputation already. Yeah, dies in the camp.
Yeah, that's not
morale just plummets.
Yeah. So the Albans, as you can imagine, are starting to become a little less keen about maybe going to war.
Yeah, and interestingly, from Livy's perspective on this, the Alban social structure is almost exactly the same as the Roman social structure. So the king dies, they decide that they need to have somebody to fill in the gap.
Sure.
And because it's a war, rather than having an interrex, they stick a dictator in place.
Yeah.
This all seems like really sort of... what's the word for it? Out of sync with the timelines of things.
Yeah. But writing from Livy's point of view, I guess that's what you do.
Anachronistic, that's the word I was looking for.
Yes.
An anachronism.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, a guy called Medius Fufatius. I've been thinking about where I'll place the emphasis on all of the vowels.
No, it sounds a bit like a rap to me, like Medius, Fufatius.
Medius,
yeah, no, I can't
Fufatius.
Yeah, anywho.
Is elected dictator.
I'm just going to call him the Alban.
The Alban dictator.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And he kind of approaches Tullus and says, maybe we shouldn't do this.
Yeah. Have you thought about, like, the enemy that we have in common?
Yes, exactly.
Because,
like Etruscan people.
Yeah. Have you considered the Etruscans?
Yeah, because as we've probably, I hope, made clear by now, Rome is by no means a dominant force at this point in time. It's really still very much on the make and very much at the mercy, perhaps, of other people, or other like city-states around them who are also, increasing in power and whatnot. And so it's not a guarantee that if Rome goes to war, Rome is going to win. And the Etruscans are quite aggressive.
The Etruscans are pretty well established.
Yeah, exactly.
The Albans and the Romans are like, okay, so
we've got this enemy.
So we've got the Etruscans, and so Tullus is like, okay, you've made a good point. I mean, I know I wanted this war, but I hear you.
I'm rethinking this.
Yeah. So let's set up an alliance.
Yes.
That's probably what we need to do.
Yeah.
And if we go into an alliance, we need to know who's going to be in charge of that alliance.
Yeah. So in other words, we need to settle it by a triplet showdown.
Interestingly, the first option is to just go to war anyway. And, like, have all the forces and decide who wins from that, and then that will be the alliance. Sure. And then they're like, actually, well, if we've got a common enemy, we'll probably lose a lot of troops that way.
Let's not waste our resources.
Yeah, that's going to be detrimental overall.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a symbolic showdown. As it happens, the Romans have a set of triplets
on their side. Yeah.
And the Albans have a set of triplets on their side.
Handy.
I find this completely baffling.
Well, when you think about it, though,
3 is a magic number.
Isn't it likely that there probably was a set of triplets on each side? I mean, in a city of that size, couldn't there be a set of triplets on each side?
I don't know. How many sets of triplets have you encountered in life? We live in a much more densely populated world.
I've never met a set of triplets.
Yeah. I know one set of triplets.
I don't know any, that's true. Okay, fair point.
Okay.
Fair point. I'm just trying to give Livy the benefit of the doubt. Livy does point out, though, that we actually don't know for sure which set of triplets fought on which side. Because we've basically got the Horati and the Curiati. And we don't know who is who, but he thinks
that the Horatii are the Romans.
Yes, yeah. I just shouldn't say things. I just shouldn't say words.
No, you should. You should. You're doing really well. And the Curiatii are the Albans. At least this is what he runs with from this point onwards.
And that's what we're going to run with too. Yeah.
Wow. In lieu of other evidence.
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
Yeah. The idea is that these triplets are of relative age. They're all male triplets as well. So
yes.
I'm just
I'm
saying,
true.
For like detail purposes.
Absolutely.
The winner out of the combat between the two sets of triplets would represent the victory of the city as a whole.
Yeah.
And determine who rules the alliance.
Yeah. And I have to say, I think that Livy's account of this fight reads very much like a Hollywood blockbuster.
Take over the narrative.
Well, I mean, it's just very much like the crowd looks on in amazement and no one can really see what's going on. It's just a flurry of swords and a bit of blood there and cloaks and, oh my god, what's going on? But very quickly.
Unfortunately, really quickly.
Yeah.
2 of the Romans are dead.
Yeah, and so basically you've got 1 Roman left standing.
1 Roman left, uninjured.
However, all the 3 Albans are wounded.
Yes, and we don't know the degree to which they're wounded.
No.
But
it sounds serious enough, though, because this surviving Roman, who's miraculously also not wounded, decides that he's going to win by dividing up the triplets, which sounds quite reasonable, by, sort of running away,
not fleeing entirely, but just creating some space so they can break up.
Exactly, yeah, and basically hoping that he's kind of going to wear them down, like, because they're injured, that their injuries will, make this chase quite unendurable. And then through that way, he kind of splits them up and is able to kill them one by one.
Slowly but surely, he kills all the wounded Alban
Exactly.
triplets.
And so the tables are turned once again.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And, it's very exciting for the Romans because they've been all like, gasp, oh god, everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
And
we're doomed.
Yes,
yeah.
And then cheering on the one last one, and he gets through, and so he despoils all of the victims.
Yeah.
So what
Takes
this
all their
means.
stuff.
Takes all their stuff. This is an important component of Roman warfare, and it's going to become increasingly important as we move forward as well.
They like their spoils.
Yeah, it's really worth mentioning this idea of the spolia.
Yeah.
The arms that one strips from the enemy.
Yes.
War booty, if you like.
Very sensible idea, really. When you think
Well,
about it. Yeah.
you wouldn't want to waste it, would you?
No.
And increasingly there's like metal content and things like that, which you can smelt and do stuff with. So, exciting times.
Yeah, not to mention it's just handy to have extra armor and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so he takes all the spoils.
Yep.
And then like the Romans are like, okay, so we're the rulers of the Albans now.
Awesome.
And Tullus talks to Medius, the dictator of the Albans, and says, I think you should be careful because, I've got some problems with the guys over at Veies.
Yeah.
This is one of the Etruscan. This is one of the Etruscan cities.
Yeah.
So it seems pretty clear. The backstory to this is that Tullus has been stirring up almost everybody in the neighbouring regions.
Yeah. As everyone expected, seemingly.
And he's like, I think you guys go home and just prepare because I think we've got some extra combat coming up.
Yeah.
And then Livy switches the narrative back to this last remaining triplet, and I think this is really fascinating. And I do want to go into this story.
Yeah, thank you, because I really find this fascinating as well. Because basically, the triplet that survives, Horatius, he returns to Rome, and he has, as you mentioned, the spoils, from the dead Albans, which include things like their cloaks, right? Now,
distinguishing.
Not only was this man a triplet, but he also had a sister. And as luck would have it, this sister happened to be engaged to one of the dead Albans. And so she
Could this narrative get any more crazy?
I know, yeah. And so she sees the cloak of her dead fiancé, which she had made for him.
The poignancy is getting rather terrible.
Exactly. Here. I shouldn't be laughing. And so naturally...
Things are going to get worse.
Naturally she starts, crying, and she loosens her hair in her grief.
She starts to do the whole lamenting thing, the performance of grief, the tearing at herself, and sort of screaming out. And
his name, so, I imagine it was something like, oh, dead Alban, oh, dead Alban.
And Horatius is,
furious.
Yeah, he's like, I just won,
the whole war.
The whole war.
Yeah, myself.
I just lost my two brothers.
Yeah.
I just won the whole war for us, and you're gonna, upstage me as I enter into the city with the spoils by crying about this, and he runs her through with a sword.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme anger.
I think we should be, this encapsulates some of the stuff that's fundamentally
Roman,
distinct about Roman culture, and fundamentally, I suppose, from a modern perspective, entirely misogynistic.
Yeah. Can I say what he actually says, apparently, as he, plunges the sword in?
Please.
Begone to your betrothed with your ill-timed love, since you have forgot your brothers, both the dead and the living, and forgot your country. So perish every woman who mourns a foe.
Yeah, and you think to yourself, but you were betrothed to him for, she wouldn't have necessarily had much of a say in that betrothal.
Absolutely.
And the idea that the Albans were a foe is a recent occurrence.
Very
Presumably
recent.
the betrothal predates
It seems pretty recent.
the transition of the Albans from, let's get married to them to, let's kill them.
Yeah.
This seems to be entirely out of her control.
Absolutely.
Nevertheless, she is
And
slain.
you would think also that she would therefore have a certain duty to mourn her fiancé. I mean, divided loyalties.
Well, this is where it becomes a problem, because from the Roman perspective, family is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And she's just betrothed to him. She's not actually married to him. If she'd been part of that family,
of
if the marriage had taken place, it might be a very different story.
Yeah. But because she's hasn't transferred her loyalties yet, it's not cool. But still, I still think she would have been in a very conflicted position if this story actually was true, which I don't know.
Well, like everything to do with this period, we can't be sure how true anything might be.
Yeah. Just seems very convenient.
it becomes sort of an illustrative sort of morale tale.
Absolutely.
Directed at women and at men, educating them in
How to
terms of
behave,
how to be
Yeah.
a man in Roman society,
Yeah.
how to execute family duty,
Yeah.
and how to be a woman and what is permissible and not permissible.
But I suppose the interesting thing about this story is also the part that comes next, in that it's not
it gets
like...
worse.
Yeah. It's not like all the Romans are like, high five, you've killed this woman.
Yeah.
I don't know why the accent.
I like what you did there.
Yeah.
Now we're Victoire. No.
Yeah.
No.
No, they're actually quite horrified by what he's done.
They are.
So, yeah, it kind of...
Horatius has to go to trial.
Yeah, and
this.
even the king at the time is like, I don't really want to deal with this. This seems like a hot potato. I'm just going to toss it to another official, the duumvirs. And they can handle it because I don't really want to be the judge of the guy who's just like won the war but committed murder.
Yeah, and the turning for the trial seems to be the moment where Horatius's father comes out and speaks at the trial and says, look, what my son did was completely justified.
Yes, absolutely. Because it seems like he was actually going to be convicted of, and that's I have to admit, it's been a long time since I looked at this kind of stuff, and I was kind of surprised because it's what you would more or less expect, like a woman being put in line by her menfolk,
Yeah, and this sort of initial story is far more conflicted than that. It seems that the populace is very much like, that's a step too far. Like, it doesn't really matter what you've done that deserves a triumph or a reward.
Yes.
Actually, you shouldn't murder your sister because she's grieving her betrothed.
Yeah.
But then the father comes out and says, look, do you really want to punish the person who has put us in a position of power, first of all?
Yep.
He has won us imperial power over the Albans. You want to consider that.
Yeah.
Also, I think he did the right thing.
Yeah.
And so a father has come out and basically...
And I would have used my authority to sort this whole situation.
Yeah, and he's like, and if I had been there, I would have killed her.
Yeah, exactly.
It was pretty much where he gets to in that speech.
He also, on a personal note, says, look, if you take this child, if you take my last child, this is my last child.
Yeah,
you take
I've only got one child left, guys.
Yeah.
So
I've lost 3 in a really short amount of time.
Yeah, you might want to consider that. I mean, one of them was killed by another one, but nevertheless, I've now only got this one left.
Yeah, and so they end up acquitting him. And Livy admits that it's not really because this was perhaps the right judgment for the crime, but because they have to kind of honour what he has done for them.
Yeah, so they've sort of made a decision that the valour achieved in warfare is more important than the way you interrelate with family members.
Yeah, definitely. And, of course, again, doesn't just end there. No. Keeps going.
But wait.
Yeah, exactly. In that, obviously, a murder has still been committed. And so they still need to somehow make amends for this. And so the father is commanded to basically pay for rites to be carried out that would sort of appease the gods and sort of, atone for the bloodshed.
Yes. So this idea that somehow you can correct this in the eyes of the gods, and everything can go on as usual. Starts to come into play.
Yeah, and one of the things apparently is still around in Livy's day. He seems to indicate this. Basically, they erect this beam across the street that's meant to symbolize a yoke, and the remaining son is made to pass under it with a covered head, and apparently that sister's beam, as it became known, was still being maintained in Livy's day. So, yeah, kind of interesting, aftermath there.
Yeah.
Anywho, as you might expect.
On that happy note.
Exactly. Back to war.
Yeah, well, perhaps unsurprisingly, the treaty between the Albans and the Romans breaks down.
Yes.
This becomes super obvious when they start to get into a battle with the Etruscans.
Yeah, because basically the Albans kind of said to these people that were going to come into grief with the Romans, look, you guys start up some conflict and we'll totes switch sides at the crucial moment.
You can see how the Albans got there, though, because this is pretty much what happened to them, right?
I could understand.
Right when Tullus got into power. So
I don't blame them at all.
They've taken everything on board and they're like, okay, so now we're part of this alliance.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, sure, guys.
Oh, so got your back.
You guys have totally double-crossed us before.
Yeah.
I wonder how we could double-cross you back.
Yeah, exactly. So basically when it comes time for this battle to take place between these Etruscan forces and the Romans, the Albans kind of gradually back away slowly.
Yeah, they're there on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, so, just gently.
Yeah, before just don't make any sudden movements they don't
Make
notice.
it look like it's a strategy.
Yeah.
And that we're going to come around from behind. And so we just need to back away now so we can get that circulation movement going on.
I love the fact that Livy says that the Alban commander is not brave enough to either desert or stay.
Just sort of like, let's just hover here, guys, just out of the way of the
I feel
battle.
the song coming on. Should I stay or should I go?
No.
Yeah, so anyway, they've backed sufficiently away to kind of be watching the proceedings.
Yeah. And just to see whether, I don't know whether it's a sort of a hubristic moment or just testing the waters afterwards.
Yeah.
But Medius is still the dictator of the Albans. And after the battle is concluded and it appears that the Romans have gotten through okay.
Yeah, because Tullus, of course, is the guy that saves the day. He manages to trick the opposing forces, and he kind of apparently manages to hide the fact that the Albans...
Yeah. He kind of passes it off as some sort of strategy that he's organised earlier, just so his own forces don't lose
And he
morale.
also starts saying things really loudly, like, oh, we are so going to win, or something like that. And he knew that people on the other side, some of them would apparently understand Latin, and they'd hear it and go, oh shit, they're saying things like, we're going to win, so they must be about to win. Oh no. Run away.
This is the sort of stuff that works really well in the heat of battle. And so he's noticed that the Alban forces have withdrawn, but he's disguised that from his own troops.
Yes.
And so when Medius comes up later...
After they've won, by the way.
To Tullus, and is like, dudes, great victory. This has been amazing. What an alliance we have.
Yeah, and Tullus is like, indeed it is.
Indeed.
Would you mind joining us at our camp in 1 hour?
Yeah.
I'd like to celebrate with you. Yeah.
I want to give a speech to all of the troops, you know?
And the Albans are like, whew.
I've got away with that one.
Got away with that one. We'll totally be there in 1 hour. Yeah. You guys won again. And so they do this. They each retire and then come back together at dawn. And Tullus starts making this speech.
Yeah, well, Tullus is like, this has been a really great victory for us. Yeah. It's been great to have you guys on our sides. We want to bring all you Albans in and make you citizens.
Yep. However, Metius. Metius.
But except for one guy.
Yeah. You.
While he's doing the speeches, he seems to have organised some of his centurions, so his more senior soldiers, to wander through the crowd.
And just surround him.
And surround Medius gradually.
And they're like, 1, 2, 3, go!
And as he gets to the point where he's like, you, sir, are a treacherous little so-and-so.
Yeah.
The centurions grab him.
Yeah.
And... things get rather physically nasty for Medius at that point in time.
Although I have to say, classic Roman punishment in that it's very apt. He is apparently tied up to horses and torn in two to symbolise his divided loyalties. There's a bit of poetic irony.
I would not have wanted to see this.
No.
This sounds terribly nasty.
No.
So 2 4-horse chariots.
Yeah.
And the horses of each chariot whipped to run in different directions.
Yep.
With Medius tied in between them.
Ouch, that would so be bad. Yeah.
That would be nasty.
Yeah. Even Livy says it's pretty nasty what this guy had to go through. However, he does point out that the Romans generally are not so nasty.
Redemption. I don't know. There's been a lot of killings so far.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't deny that they punish people, but he just says generally the punishments are not quite as bad as this one. Touché.
Well, after all of these incidents where the backwards-forwards relationship between Rome and Alba has not been going well, it's clear that they don't really trust each other.
Yeah. The time has come, I think, for an all-out takeover.
Yeah. The Romans, Tullus leads his forces and they basically raze the city of Alba Longa.
Yeah. And basically, he sends these people to go and get the Albans and bring them,
Yeah, well, this is what's interesting. And this starts to set up a bit of a pattern as well.
Yeah.
Or at least build upon something that we've seen earlier where they take the whole population of Alba and they say, okay, actually, we're just going to make you Roman citizens.
Yeah.
Like, come to Rome. We'll settle you in our city. We're actually going to burn yours to the ground, so you can't stay here.
Everybody celebrate!
Yeah. Yeah. The only things we're not going to destroy in Alba are the temples, because don't want to offend the gods.
Yeah, exactly. That would be bad.
But they take all of the population of Alba, bring them to Rome, and then they open up one of the hills that currently hasn't been settled yet.
Yes.
Ooh, it's
eventually
like land development, expansion.
Eventually there will be 7 hills.
So the Albans are settled primarily on the Caelian hill.
Yeah, and they seem to have been a little bit bewildered and upset to leave their
Well, I'm not surprised, really. It's a bit of a shock.
But nonetheless, once the Romans start to get impatient, they're like, hurry up, guys, we're totally going to get violent if you don't move.
If you don't leave.
Yeah.
This might become something else.
Yeah, they come along quietly enough.
Yeah.
But Tullus, as you say, he settles them on the Caelian Hill, and he decides to set himself up there.
Yeah, this seems like a grand gesture of inclusion. Right. Oh, I'm going to live with you guys as well.
I'm going to reside amongst my people.
Well, this seems to be a strategy to sort of encourage integration.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's not going to be the last time we see a Roman king setting himself up in an area which he wants to attract other people to. Like, this is going to be the next up-and-coming area, guys. It's called gentrification.
Yeah. You know you want to live here with me.
Exactly.
And my new friends. The Roman, I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
So in order to accommodate the sort of influx in population, because Rome has probably doubled in size at this point.
Exactly.
He expands the Senate and enrolls prominent families of
the Albans.
Yeah, including
the Julii.
Including the Julii.
Yeah.
Wait for it. They'll come up sometime soon.
Yeah, sorry, I'm very excited about that.
and the Curiatii, so the family that were of the triplets.
You'd want to get them on side.
I think so. They might need some compensation.
And the Servilii. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't really think any of the other people are going to come up much. Although I suppose is it Cluelii?
Yeah.
They might come up again.
We'll let you know if they're going to be important.
Yeah, and a few others. Anywho.
This means that he has to expand where the Senate meets as well.
Yes.
And this is where the Curia Hostilia comes into play.
Indeed. Again, won't be the last time we mention that.
No. He also... He takes a strategy which is sort of class stratification, like integration at all levels.
Yes.
So he creates 10 new squadrons of equites.
Yep.
So the knights.
Yep.
And he also fleshes out the legions, which presumably are a little bit run down after the battles. Fleshes them
more. So much more.
You know who we could fill in those gaps with?
Yeah.
Alban soldiers.
Indeed.
So you think to yourself, that's going to be a rough time.
Yeah.
I can't imagine... to me, that would be the most difficult moment of integration.
But what better way to unify a people and celebrate the fact that you've got kick-ass new forces than another war?
Well, you can bring them all together. Yeah, yes. Forget your differences, guys. You're now on the same side, like for real.
Yeah, exactly. Not just in name.
Yeah. And nothing could be better to bring them together than a war against the Sabines.
Ah, the Sabines.
Yeah, because they haven't had enough already.
No, exactly.
You know.
Oh, dear.
There doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason for choosing the Sabines at this point in time.
They're well aware, of course, that there are some Sabines living in Rome.
There's quite a lot of Sabines living in Rome.
Nonetheless.
Never.
Yeah. And so
don't let that
Tullus
stop
decides to make the preemptive strike, invades the Sabines, and again the Romans are victorious.
Yeah, well, it's great because Tullus is like, well, you know, I just maxed out my cavalry and my infantry, so like...
We're at full strength.
Obviously we were going to win.
Yeah. Just doubled the population of my city.
They were like, this is great.
Yeah.
So they put down the victory to the expanded forces, which is obviously part of this morale sort of integration process that they're trying to do.
And you have to admit, if this were all true, which we're presuming that it is, it would probably be awesome to win a war, you know, like at this point in time and feel all like buddy. Albans and Romans once more.
Now we're all Romans.
Yeah.
Smooth sailing.
Yeah.
To me, this feels like it has so many problems.
But you can see how they're totally trying to just explain how all these things...
Yeah, well, this is establishing a lot of the things about Roman character, the way the Romans go about doing business, and also the way that Romans accrue power in Italy and start to develop and expand as a result of that.
Yeah,
they can't just stay a small city and go into little skirmishes against cities of the same size.
No.
At some point, if they're going to be the Rome that Livy is living in,
Yeah.
when he's writing his history,
You have to explain.
they have to expand, they have to start to have a reach, have influence.
And they have to be pretty successful at doing this.
Yeah, and not lose a lot.
Yeah, exactly. This is true.
Losing's no good.
Not them.
Yeah, it doesn't work for the narrative and it doesn't work for history.
No.
So let's just not do that.
And then we end on kind of an odd note. It's like going into like religious stuff, kind of.
Oh, yeah. See, my eyes light up.
Yeah, you're much better at this kind of thing than I am, I must admit.
I love a good prodigy.
Yeah, yes. Well, see, this is the other thing. We delve into the land of oracles and prodigies.
Yeah.
Because apparently, after the defeat of the Sabines, everyone's on, like, woo, such a high. But then, apparently, they get wind of this story about a rain of stones on the Alban Mount. And everyone's like, psh, whatever.
Rain of stones?
Yeah, that sounds ridiculous. But they check it out, and apparently it was somewhat true.
Yeah. It's raining pebbles on the Alban Mount.
Yeah.
So it's a prodigy that is now, I suppose, technically in Roman territory in a symbolic way.
Very true.
So they check that out, and reputedly there is also a voice from the mountaintop grove.
Indeed, telling them you've ticked off the gods.
Yeah, and that in order to make things right, you really need to celebrate the sacrifices as the forefathers have done.
Yeah, because it's mostly the Albans who are being targeted here, isn't it? That basically they've actually been too good at assimilating that.
Well, yeah, the trouble seems to be that even though the Alban temples have been preserved by Tullius's decree, decree, I should say, announced correctly.
Yeah.
A lot of the religious ritual that the Albans engaged in themselves have fallen by the wayside.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been taken away from their geographical area and sort of drawn into Rome. So it's perhaps not surprising. So this seems to be like, there's got to be a balance.
Yes.
You can't just abandon the rituals. They're important.
Yep.
And
so you should keep them up.
Yes.
Or face the wrath of the gods.
Yes.
Yes.
So the Romans are like, all right, how about a 9-day celebration?
Indeed. And in fact, it has become a custom, apparently, that whenever a prodigy is reported 3 times, then there should be...
Yeah. So they start to institute a set of formulations and guidelines on how to participate in certain rituals, when to engage in them.
So basically, basically, if there is a prodigy, it has to be reported, a number of times or whatever before they're going to say, oh, that must be actually happening. Not just some crazy story.
But despite their best efforts, this doesn't stop the pestilence that hits Rome.
I love a pestilence, yeah.
You got the prodigies, you've got the pestilence.
Yeah, and so... understandably, perhaps, if everyone's being sort of struck down by this pestilence, they're not feeling quite as warlike as they once did.
Yeah. They don't really want to go.
No. And
Tullus is not very happy about this. He's like, dudes, we've got war.
Yeah. And surely if there's a pestilence in the city, then a lovely vacation to a war elsewhere would sort you right out.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he then also gets sick.
Once he gets sick, he really changes his tune. He's like, dudes, I totally understand now. I don't want to get up either.
Yeah, exactly. As Livy says it, the Horsey spirit was broken.
Yeah. And the trouble is that... I would really like some details on what type of pestilence this was.
Yeah, because we don't really have any details.
No, I would like that. That's just my curiosity as a historian coming through. But it seems that while Tullus is ill, he sort of becomes much more esoteric in his interests and more occultish.
Yes.
Even from the other Romans' perspective.
Yeah.
Livy describes him as becoming prey to all sorts of superstitions.
Yes.
And he starts to devote himself very specifically to sacrifices in honour of Jupiter, Elichius.
Yeah, I think that's what I go with too.
Yeah.
Well done. Once again, braving the pronunciation.
I'm not sure about the pronunciation.
Well, anyway, yeah. He I can understand how, I mean, it's not that unusual even these days, I don't think, for people to, sort of get religion when there's, their health is suffering or whatever.
Not at all.
That actually does not strike me as unusual.
No, but unfortunately, as far as anybody's concerned, Jupiter in particular apparently
is angry.
Tullus doesn't do the rites properly.
No.
And is thus struck down by lightning.
Spend a little bit too much time on the battlefield. killed and can't quite figure it all out. It's too complicated.
Yeah, so we get a variation on, like, the death of Tullus in our sources.
I like the version where he's struck by a thunderbolt.
Yes, well, that's Jupiter coming into play.
Yeah.
You have not done those rituals correctly. I have something to say about that.
I'm going to kill you and burn down your house.
That's what you deserve.
Exactly.
So there's divine retribution comes into play as a possible moment of death.
Yes.
And the other is that the would-be successor of Tullus actually just has his family murdered.
Oh dear. Well,
Ouch.
I guess
It's not as quite as exciting, but possibly more plausible.
Yeah, I know, but it's kind of like Romulus, you know? It's got continuity if they're both killed by thunderbolts rather than both being murdered. Anyway, on that note, dear listeners, I feel that we probably should wrap up because I know that you're dying for us to get on to recording the next episode about the fourth King of Rome. That's what will be coming next. But before we go, I have a little shout out to some male podcasters in the good old UK. If you're enjoying our light-hearted take on ancient Rome, I think you'd very much enjoy listening to a history of the kings and queens of England as told by Graham and Ali of Rex Factor fame. Check it out.